You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I am a USA Today bestselling author and a ninth grade English teacher, and I'm glad to have a return guest on the show today. We're going to be talking to Robert Skead, and he has a new middle grade book out called Legend of the Narwhals. Robert, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, DelSheree. Thanks for having me on today. As you just said, my name is Robert Skead. I am an author in New Jersey, and primarily I focus on middle grade stories. Legend of the Narwhals is my first fantasy tale. In the past, the books that I've had published have been on the topics of sports and also the American Revolution.
And this one, we first connected with your last book, baseball related, which I'm always happy to read. But we connected because your publisher is here in New Mexico, Artemisia Publishing. And this book is coming out through the same publisher, correct?
Correct, yes.
I'm glad that the partnership has been going well and you're on book 2 with them.
Yes, it's a great publisher. I'm very happy with everything they've done. Couldn't be more pleased.
Well, and I'll come back to this later, but I did want to talk about the cover and the illustrations in it, so don't let me forget that. But before I get off on too many rabbit trails, tell us a little bit about Legend of the Narwhals, and so they know what we're talking about.
Sure. So as with anything that happens in my writing world, I kind of get fascinated with certain topics in my life, and then sooner or later, a story gets birthed out of it. It's kind of been my MO. For example, I'm interested in my old baseball card collection, right? And then all of a sudden I get a story that becomes Safe at Home, a baseball card mystery, sports memorabilia, and then all of a sudden I get Hidden Glory, a baseball bat adventure, the American Revolution, and then all of a sudden American Revolution stories happen. So that's kind of what happens to me all the time. And several years ago, I got interested in learning about narwhals. They're real creatures, right? Some people think they're mythical, like a unicorn, but they really exist. And I read a book about them and became fascinated with them. And literally while I'm reading this book, the scene that's on the cover of Legend of the Narwhals miraculously popped into my head. So it's like a Viking Nordic folktale, which I'm Scandinavian, so that kind of fell into my heritage. I felt was pretty cool. And it's about a Viking prince. I never used the word Viking in the story, but essentially he's a Viking prince. His name is Asgar. And he's on a search to find his mother who is missing and ends up in a strange world called Arctenrod in his father's northern kingdom. And there, the world is totally different. There's snow monsters, and there's the legend that has been told in his village for years about narwhals and how a narwhal king will sacrifice his tusk to a chosen one who has shown empathy in his life when he's in danger. And sure enough, just like the scene on the cover, he gets confronted with snow monsters near the water's edge. The narwhal king sees his heart, sacrifices his tusk, which in the hand of a chosen one is like a sword that can shoot lightning and defeat an enemy. So, of course, in this case, it can defeat snow monsters, which are terrorizing the land of that northern kingdom. So it's a great story about empathy and friendship, betrayal. So there's snow monsters and narwhals and betrayal and stolen gold and friendship. And ultimately, Asgar has to use the narwhal tusk to defeat the enemies.
So
we're trying to.
Lots for middle grade readers to be interested in, for sure.
Yeah.
Lots of adventure, monsters, all all those kind of things that I think really stick out to, well, any reader, but particularly the middle grade reader, where this type of young character having this bigger than life adventure is kind of a hallmark of that age group. And so I wanted to ask you where the inspiration or just kind of where some of the different elements of the story came from. Was it from existing myths and legends in the Nordic Scandinavian culture, or are some of these more your own interpretation or just inventions?
Yeah, it's really my own unique imagination and invention, I guess you could say. The whole story of the narwhals and the tusk and snow monsters, that literally just came out of my imagination. There's some kind of like Viking-ish fighting men that the king has in his command, and they have some cool names that I took from Nordic folklore, like Baffin and Thorfinn, things like that. So I was able to take some names that had been used in the past and either do a play on them, change some of the wording around, or actually use some of them as they are. So that was kind of the only thing that I took from Nordic folk tales, but it's told in that kind of fashion, though.
Mm-hmm. And you present this on the cover. It says, written by, basically Prince of Asgard of Tundrel, as translated by Robert Skead. So tell us about the presentation of the story to the reader, because it's a little bit different.
Yeah, lots of people have been asking about that, especially kids. I've done a few author visits, and kids have read the story already, and that was actually a lot of fun. And they all told me they couldn't put it down. The teacher was amazed that these kids, some of them discovered a love for reading for the first time. But to answer your question, can you just ask that one more time so I can get it right? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so just the way you present it is that basically it's kind of like found novel, and you are translating it for your readers.
Yes. So it was my first story ever written in the first person. And I often try to challenge myself as a writer to do things I haven't done before. Everything else I had written had been in the third person. So this was the first one in the first person. And I read a lot of middle grade novels in the first person to kind of get that voice. So since it's in the voice of Prince Asgard, right, and it's him telling the story, it kind of made more sense that readers would have the impression that he wrote it, even starting with the wording on the cover, and that I translated it. And there's a really cool opening, I think, where there's an article about, what's the word I'm looking for, scrolls being found in Greenland that were really old, written in Furtik, and which is a Scandinavian language. And this is the first-hand account of Asgard, the Viking prince, telling what happened to him in his own words. And it was recently discovered. And it's kind of written like a press release or a newspaper article. And that myself and a team of scholars, took some time to translate it, and this is the story. So it all kind of came hand in hand with that.
Well, that's a really fun way to present it, I think, for young readers to feel that really close instant connection with the character of like, oh, this is, his journal or report, kind of a little bit of both, that he's writing the story after having come back from this adventure that he has. Really brings this closeness to the story that it sounds like, and I would expect young readers would really enjoy and latch onto. Yes.
And even though it is written like a journal, but there are chapters, but the chapter headings aren't really like you would find in the wording isn't found like in a typical chapter book. They're more like journal chapter headings.
Well, and
as he takes his journey.
Oh, sorry, interrupted you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, just as he takes his journey, it's kind of the little chapter headings he created.
Well, and you also have little fun notes, kind of like asides in various places throughout the text, where little comments added in outside of the story, and they're put in little boxes where he kind of inserts a little afterthought or kind of a little joke that he's sharing with the reader as well, which I thought was fun.
Those were a lot of fun to create. And actually, one of my friends who writes as well helped me do some of those because he's got a better sense of humor than I do. And but those are fun for us to do. And we put them in the boxes or call-outs just to make sure that they got seen. Because sometimes when you're reading a story, if some readers were skimming, we didn't want them to miss those fun parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great way to do that. I think especially when you get really engaged in a story, sometimes it's hard not to skim a little bit when you're like, oh, what's the next thing that's going to happen?
Right.
And for young readers, that does kind of give them a little bit of a pause and I felt like even for me as I was reading it, when felt like I was maybe reading too fast. It was between the illustrations and the little call outs that it was like, oh, take it all in.
Yeah, and they're great little chuckles, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and coming back to what I had started to mention earlier, I wanted to ask about the cover and then the illustrations within the book and what was involved in creating those and your input as far as the author making sure that they were accurately depicting what you wanted them to.
Oh, sure. I am really, really excited and proud of all the illustrations and especially the cover. Like I said, the cover is exactly what I kind of saw in my imagination when I had the idea for the story. So Artemisia, the publisher, hired Eduardo Garcia, and he's an illustrator out of Mexico City. And he does a lot of work for book companies, so DC, Marvel, Boom, IDW. And he is so talented. And so he did the cover, he did all the illustrations. So as an author, when there's illustrations in the book, we often get the assignment to kind of give the publisher some suggestions as to what scenes in the story might lend themselves to being illustrated. So fortunately enough, this publisher, Artemisia, asked me to do that. And so I was able to kind of give suggestions to what those scenes might be. And when the publisher agrees with it, they give the assignment to the illustrator with some art direction as to, what that might look like. Sometimes they'll even include the written paragraph or two of what's in the scene on that page. And Eduardo Garcia he practically nailed almost every one. There was very minor direction needed to change things up in the process. And, the publisher also, copied me on some of the emails or responses and asked me if there was, anything I wanted to change in that process, which is always a nice privilege. But yeah, I'm so excited and so pleased with his work. They're all so much fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed having the illustrations because that's an investment to be able to include something like that. And so I think it really adds a lot to this reading level, especially because this is an age group that we're still kind of struggling to recover post-pandemic in reading interest and get kids interested, keep them interested, and having kind of that multimodal approach to storytelling where it's not a picture book, but there are enough illustrations through that you can take those breaks to appreciate them, get a little bit more context on the story, and just add more fun and excitement to the experience. So that's really cool to have that investment made and to be so pleased with how everything turned out.
Yeah, and especially the snow monsters, right? They can't be too scary, but they can't be almost comical looking either. They have to be just right. And I feel like Eduardo just got them perfect.
I really enjoyed them. And I was going to ask if you had any readers in the age group look at them and kind of give you some feedback on those before they were approved, or were you able to judge that, just your experience with the middle grade audience, and feel like that was the right blend of scary but not too scary
Right.
and that balance of engaging the reader without scaring off maybe the ones who are a little bit more sensitive?
Right. We didn't do any focus groups on myself. My wife is a teacher in elementary school, so I did show them to her. She thought they were great. And the publisher, Artemisia, obviously signed off on them too. And, he and I had a discussion. His name is Jeff Habinger, about the look of the snow monsters. So we both agreed they were just right.
Oh, well, I'm glad that process went so smoothly. Well, and I wanted to ask as well, developing the world and having these kind of mental images in your head, as you said, you're kind of picturing some of these events in the story that are happening, and then building on that through words. That's a fun combination. That's something I learned a while back. Like, not everybody is actually capable of doing, like, picturing their writing and putting it into visuals, like, as you're writing. I have a hard time with that. Like, some people can write and it, like, basically plays like a movie in their head.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I can't do that. But it sounds like you're a little bit more of that kind of writer where you can picture it as you're writing. And
totally.
Is that part of your development of the story in the world?
Yeah, it's part of my development of the story in the world, but it's also part of who I am. when I decided I wanted to be a writer years ago, when my mom told me that she thought that was my God-given talent, I went to film school because I'd been watching a ton of movies, obviously, all my life, and then started getting ideas for stories on my own, but I had no idea what to do with them. And the kind of way my mind works is I see action in my head and I hear dialogue. And so that's kind of how a screenplay is formatted. And I had to really train myself by reading lots of books. I don't have a master's in the fine art of writing kids' books. I literally went from writing scripts to learning how to write middle grade books by doing a lot of reading and making a lot of mistakes in my own writing. But that's kind of how I see things in my head. I see the action, I hear the dialogue. And then, so to write it in a book format, like if you read one of the first drafts of my stories, you'd probably think I was a horrible writer. But because I go back and do things over and over and over again, I feel like then I nail it. But yeah, that's kind of how my brain works.
So do you start focusing more on the dialogue and some of those aspects that are similar to screenwriting when you're developing your initial story concept?
Not really. I don't focus on that. It just kind of happens naturally. That's just what I hear in my head. And I was trained because, if you listen to a conversation in a coffee shop and you eavesdrop and then you kind of write it, even if you just transcribed it, people don't talk the way they write oftentimes. So dialogue is kind of an art in and of itself. And so it's just something I trained myself to do.
That's awesome. I always find it so interesting to hear the different ways that writers approach putting everything together and getting their ideas to mesh and develop into the full picture, because it's always a little bit different.
Yeah. And the hard part when you're writing middle grade as an adult is, you need your characters to sound not like an adult, right? To sound like a 12-year-old or thereabouts. The publishers have editors, right? And they help you change things up if you need to, which I always tell kids in schools, editors are like teachers and they help make our work better. And there's usually, two or three rounds of development work and rewriting that goes on when you work with a publisher and editors. And I never take that personally. Their ideas always make things better.
I'm glad that that's been a helpful and good experience for you. I think I've learned the most about writing at times when I've been working with an editor and going back through my own writing and being like, oh, yeah, I do that.
Yep.
Yes, I need to fix that area. And it's like things that once you're too close to it, it's really hard to see. And to have someone come in with a fresh perspective is really helpful to get that second look at everything, or 7th or 8th or 14th, more like it probably.
Exactly. I think all writers have their hiccups, the key ways they say things, and sometimes they can say it over and over again the same way. And once those jump out at you, you either fix them yourself or somebody points them out and you fix it later.
Mm-hmm. You kind of start to get this growing list of like, okay, make sure I'm not doing that or that or that or that.
Right.
Well, and tell me about developing the world that Asgard lives in. Because we have some magic, we have some fun creatures, both real and imagined. And this is something, as you said, you put together rather than taking from existing mythology. So how did you approach that in deciding what kind of monsters you were going to have to fit the genre and just putting all of the different elements together to make this complete?
When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Engaging world.
This answer might sound kind of bizarre, but it almost kind of comes to me providentially. And when I read the story to myself, even after it's been published and printed, it oftentimes doesn't feel like I wrote it because I feel like the words just and the ideas just come to me. And when they don't come to me, I take a walk around the house and let my subconscious kind of deal with it. And then all of a sudden, after a drink of a tea or a snack, boom, I get the idea and I know what to do next. And I hit the computer and tackle it. So creating the world, I don't have anything intellectual to say that I did by that. It just kind of happened that way, happenstance. That's the power of our imaginations. And it's interesting. So this is written in the first person, right? So I wrote the sequel to Legend of the Narwhals. Publisher has it. We'll see how this book sells. Hopefully it'll sell well and they'll want to do the sequel. But in the sequel, when I was writing it, there's parts where I'm going, I don't know what happens next. And I actually have the character say something like, what's going to happen now? And then, like I said, I don't know. So I leave the computer and I go have a snack or a cup of tea or something. And boom, my subconscious comes up with it. And I come back and then the story moves forward.
I love that. I think those brain breaks really make a difference, and it's easy to overlook them and just think, no, I just keep powering through. It's going to come. I'm going to fix it. And sometimes we do just need to step away and let your brain do its work. It knows what's going on.
Yeah, and that's the power of the creative process, right? That's the fun of being a writer or a storyteller. I actually consider myself more of a storyteller than a writer. The story kind of happens in my brain and imagination, and the writing is the work and the hard part.
I like that thought on that. I think focusing on that story aspect, and it's something as humans, like, we're built to want story, to want that connection with something bigger than ourselves. And it's interesting because I've done plenty of writing classes and all that over the years, and they're great and they're helpful, but there is an aspect of writing that if you're not connecting with it on that level of the story and wanting to share that story and having something meaningful that you're trying to get across, I think that's where sometimes that writer's block, or just, whatever people want to call it, like, gets in the way of that process, like really going full circle and bringing you into that project. It's, we can get too bogged down in the technical stuff and, analyzing every word, but stepping back sometimes and just focusing on, is the story doing what it needs to do and communicating whatever it is with the person who's hearing it? And I just think that's a fun part, in whatever form that takes. Listening to poets is really interesting because they have a different approach to storytelling, but I find a lot of their processes and tactics where it's like, yeah, that really does apply to like longer works as well. It's just the end product comes out differently. It's so fascinating to see that.
Yes. And in this story, a couple of things. One, the morality tale part of it, right? The Nordic folk tale part, the message you want kids to take away from your story when they're done, right? Hopefully you're a little different when you close a book than you were at the beginning of the book, right? So, there's a couple of things I felt in this world that I wanted readers, young and old alike, to come away with. And the first one is just, the power of being empathetic and being kind. The ability to step into somebody else's shoes is something special and something we all need to do. And because, people are often, and kids are often mean, right? There needs to be forgiveness in somebody's heart. A key theme for the warriors in the book is be tough, not hard. And, when life gets hard, which it often does, it's okay to be tough, but we never want our hearts to be hardened, right? Because that's when bitterness creeps in. And, hardened heart does nobody any good. Hearts have to be soft and malleable to be a good person, a kind person, a person that's going to make a difference in the world, a person that puts others first and serves others. And it's kind of the warrior way. And so that was kind of the major theme that I wanted to get across in this story. And I was really proud that, as we mentioned earlier, there's never been a story about narwhals with a tusk that shoots lightning in the hands of a chosen one before, right? So I really felt proud that somehow, some way, divinely, that came into my brain.
Well, and it shares, like you said, a really, I think, valuable message, especially right now in our current climate and the way that things can be very not empathetic, and people can be very aggressive and combative with each other. And
Yeah.
I think kids growing up in this atmosphere need as many reminders as they can get that we can make a lot more progress and we can improve our society if we have that empathy and compassion, and if we're willing to work with people on not, my feelings are hurt, I feel betrayed, and that's it, put those walls up and not continue to work with that person in whatever the task or the problem is. Because it's really easy to do that. And so I love that this had that message that we can put ourselves in each other's shoes. And it's really a classic theme. I'm doing To Kill a Mockingbird with my class right now in 9th grade, and exact same thing, very different circumstances. But, it's really a universal message that we need those frequent and continual reminders of throughout time.
Yes. And you throw some snow monsters in, it can become fun too, right?
Absolutely. Well, now you mentioned that you have already completed book 2. And so I was going to ask you, kind of what you're working on next, because you leave book 1 open to a future adventure. So tell us kind of a little bit about that and just what you have planned, if everything goes as hoped and this is well received, which I would expect, young readers are going to enjoy this. What are your plans for Prince Asgar in the series overall?
Yeah, so I actually have that pretty well thought out. So the interesting thing is, during this writing process, when I was writing this story, my sister Lynn didn't even know I was working on a Viking folktale or Nordic folktale. And she was just doing our genealogy like she did for our my American Revolution novels, and discovered we had ancestors that fought in the American Revolution. And she actually got us all the way back to the Mayflower. But she went further back and discovered that the name Skead was actually Skarde, so Skarde. And in Nordic folktale, Skarde is a hero. And so I was like, wow. So I was almost done with Legend of Narwhals when she sent me an email and she found that out. And I told her what I was working on. She was kind of blown away too. So I'm like, all right, the story's not done yet. I got to find a way to create or sneak in a character called the Mighty Skarde. And so that's what I did. And he's off on his own adventures, but he was part of the Sir Olaf's fighting men in the Northern Kingdom, and then he was off gallivanting and saving people on his own. So I incorporated him into the sequel of Legend of the Narwhals. And I guess you could say the bad guy character I have in this story isn't snow monsters, but it's a bad girl. And so we've kind of got a sea hag and I guess you could say a giant octopus, a kraken.
Oh,
so that's the adventure. So yeah, it takes place on sea and on a deserted island. So in that story, Asgar has hero worship because he's got the mighty Skarde on a pedestal over his dad. And so in that story, he kind of learns, sometimes heroes can let us down, and that, maybe your dad's the real hero you should be having. So, and that came from, this is kind of a really cool sidebar. My parents passed away a couple years after one another, and when my dad died, we cleaned out my parents' house, and in a box that my mom had saved from when I was born, all the cards and notes and telegrams from when I was born were in this box. And I read them, and I recognized the names of neighbors that had sent cards and notes. But there was one from my dad, one of my dad's coworkers, but it was addressed to me instead of my mom and dad. And it said, "Emulate your father and you will be a good man." And that just blew me away because my dad was a very special man. He was the kind of guy you'd want to emulate. So I took that theme and incorporated that into the sequel book.
What a special thing for that coworker to have done and taken the time to pass on that message to you that you can look back on as an adult. Wow.
Yeah, I never found it until, I'm 60 years old now, so I was probably 58.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That is very cool. Well, I'm so glad it was kept and you were able to find it and see that.
Yeah.
That seems
and
like
so there's a little, in the afterword of the sequel, I tell that story to the reader about finding that note.
Very cool. That's almost the start of its own separate interesting book as well.
Yep. And then my thought is, if there's no continuing adventures of Asgard, there could be things with the mighty Skarde.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like you have some really great ideas moving forward. And I know you tend to have multiple interests. Are there any other projects that you're working on at this time, or are you kind of focused here?
Not right now. Right now I'm just kind of focused on, I'm doing what I can to promote this title. I have so many stories that I've written through the years that have yet to be sold or published. Fortunately, I just connected with a new agent, and he's going to be and has started already sending some stuff out. So I've got other middle grade stories that haven't been published, and I have some picture book stories that haven't been published. So he'll be pitching those out there, and maybe I'll have some more work published in the future. If not, I'm certainly grateful for what has happened, and I only work on ideas when I get the big idea, and it just kind of oozes out of me. So we'll see where my interest birth yet in the future.
Well, that's very exciting. I wish you the best with that. And I know for our listeners, you're not in our area, but if people in your area were interested in having you come to a school or a library and doing an author visit, what would you recommend as far as how to contact you and get that sort of thing set up?
Oh, sure. Thanks for asking. So I live in New Jersey, so the tri-state area, New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. I do author visits in primarily those 3 states. And people can go to my website, which is www.robertskead.com. Last name is spelled Skead. And you can read about my author visits and the books there and a little bit about me, but there's also a contact button, and you can send me an email and give you more information.
Well, we are out of time. So I did want to remind our listeners that the book is called Legend of the Narwhals by Robert J. Skead, and you can find more information on his website. And is there anywhere else as far as social media or newsletters or things like that you'd like to point out for people to direct their attention?
Oh, sure. So on Facebook, I guess you'd say the heading is Robert Skead Author. And then on Instagram, it's at Robert J. Skead.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, and thanks for sharing your book with us. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for the kind words, and this was a fun conversation.